Thomas Wolfe said all things point home in old October, and as we begin to nestle in for winter, it provides us a wonderful opportunity for some interesting fireside listening. So what's adorned my turntable this month? Let's find out, shall we? First album, which I do not own a physical copy of, is Todd Rundgren's Wizard A True Star from 1973, if I'm not mistaken. The reason I'm listening to this album so much, not just because it's a brilliant album, but because I'm preparing a Patreon classic album review of this record, as voted for and requested by those who have subscribed. And this is a fascinating album where Rundgren looks to translate what's going on in his mind, a mind under the influence of copious amounts of psychedelics, by the way, into sort of certain musical tones and textures. Patti Smith, of course, said this is rock and roll of the skull, and it's certainly a heady brew, shall we say. Of course, you get the track on this one, International Feel, which is sprawling away like some cacophonous splurge of sonic possibilities. But I think Zen Archer, which is my favourite track on this album. Of course, on side 2, we got that interesting medley of soul classics, done with Rundgren's interesting take on the way music should be presented. This was supposed to actually be a double album, but he crams it onto a single album, 56 minutes, which caused some sort of technical issues or depletion of sound quality, I think, in the original pressings of the record. The second album, or should I say collection of albums that has been occupying my attention, is this wonderful little box set that was actually sent to me by one of you guys, which was very generous of you. Steve Hackett's 5 classic albums. Some great records in, of course, Voyage of the Acolyte, which is very much Steve Hackett in Genesis mode. It could almost be a Genesis album, I think. Please Don't Touch is a fascinating one as well. It's one that's, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was recorded in the USA, but it certainly feels very American, lots of interesting R&B textures. And of course the wonderful Steve Walsh sings on a couple of the tracks of this album. But Spectral Mornings is my favourite Steve Hackett album, and that's the one I've been listening to more than any other. I think unlike Voyage of the Acolyte, this album feels much more modern. With this album we get Every Day, which is pretty much a live staple of Steve Hackett's set. It has a great prog build-up. The title track on this album is stunningly beautiful. It's one of the best instrumentals Steve Hackett has done, I think. We get Clocks, of course, another live staple, and Tiger Moth, which is actually an intriguing listen. But yes, I would say Spectral Mornings is my favourite here. Defector, wonderful, wonderful album. It's highly strung, not so keen on. It sounds very 1980s, has those horrible plasticky 1980s production values, which tend to, certainly don't embellish. I like to think of them as polluting the music. But wonderful, wonderful set, and a wonderful concert, by the way. The next one I've been listening to is this wonderful new album by Caravan that's been sent to me. I could say, this is a real return to form, but I hate those sort of old adages that are reeled out whenever a classic band releases a new album. It forms part of that hysteria that they try to stir up to get people to part with cash and buy something they probably had no intention of buying. Often, it's always best to let the hype die down a bit and then listen to it. But I have to say, I rather enjoyed it. It has that very specific Caravan sound, that very pithy, ironic take on things, and it combines jazz and folk and melodic rock, as they always have done, being those stalwarts of the Canterbury scene, a scene that many see as providing an interesting bridge between psychedelia and the progressive rock movement. And it's now, like a lot of albums that we're getting these days, it's been influenced by the whole lockdown process, the COVID thing. We're getting a whole subgenre of records now called the lockdown albums. And we get tracks like, Down from London, which has a typically bright, typically Caravan feel to it. And accompanying the rather wry and witty lyrics is the wonderful work on the viola by Jeffrey Richardson. A song that feels like an almost cousin to If I Was to Fly, which comes later on in the record. Every Precious Little Thing is one. It's a number about, I think it's a number about perhaps living in the moment, but being able to appreciate those things that we have in every living moment that we enjoy. Things that have been very much brought to the fore or into focus, I think, by the current situation we've all lived through for the last couple of years. It's a thoroughly pleasant album, intriguing album. I think if you're a Caravan fan, you're not going to be disappointed with this. So, yep, that's certainly been on my turntable this month. The next album on my turntable has been this one, the Moody Blues, Days of Future Past, 1967, if I'm not mistaken. It's sort of emanated from the plan to record a band's interpretation of Dvorak's Symphony No. 9. It's a concept album that tells the story of a day, and my God, what a day drenched in mellotron. It virtually drips from this record. And it's an album that's very much defined by Justin Hayward's mellifluous vocals. This is the Moody Blues' second album, if I'm not mistaken. There's a move from being an R&B band to exploring baroque pop, symphonic rock, progressive rock, delete as appropriate. This is certainly an important album as far as I'm concerned, along with the first Procol Harum album, in terms of those albums transitioning from psychedelic rock to full-on progressive rock. Interesting quote from David Fricke, I believe. He says it's one of the essential albums of 1967, closer to high art pomp than psychedelia, but there was a sharp pop discretion to the writing and a trippy romanticism in the mirroring effect of the strings and Mike Pinder's mellotron. And the next album on my list is this one, Iron Maiden Sinjutsu. Now, I've done a review of this record already, and I'm currently preparing to do a sort of comparison between Sinjutsu and Book of Souls to ascertain which one do I think is better. It's been a while since I've listened to Book of Souls, so I'm going to do a kind of a comparative study of both those records. So Sinjutsu, it's a wonderful album. I stand by everything I said in my review of this record. As I've been listening to it more, there's certain things that have been emerging that concern me about this record. So sometimes once you start listening to it in more depth and repeated listens, the certain cracks start to reveal themselves. But I will certainly be discussing those when I do my comparative study with this one and Book of Souls. I mean, I love later period Iron Maiden. A lot of fans are talking about later stuff is just too slow. They're not happy with Dickinson's voice on this album. I mean, my answer to that is, if you want to hear how Bruce Dickinson sounded on Number of the Beast, go and listen to Number of the Beast. I'm glad to have it in my collection. So that's certainly formed part of my listening for October. So there you have it. They're the albums that I've been somewhat preoccupied with for October. Be interested to know what albums have been floating your boat this month. Leave your comments below. I will ask you please to remember to click like, subscribe, and check that bell to get notified of any future uploads if you haven't already done so. And do check out some of the links below this video for ways you can support the work done here at Classic Album Review. You can make a donation, check out the wish list, like the Facebook page, become a Patreon. There's a fine body of work on my Patreon now. So with that shameless plug, I will leave it there in the hope that you will stay warm and safe, but more importantly that you keep listening.